This is not a book that I read recently, but it is a book that very strongly influenced the way I think about music and art and taste in general. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about. It's this book called Let's Talk About Love by Carl Wilson, not the same Carl Wilson from the Beach Boys, which I unfortunately found out. And it's part of a series of books called 33 and a Third. You have books like this, they look like this. And these books are very short, but they give contributors the opportunity to write about books that they enjoy or albums that they enjoy, and they write a whole book about a specific album, and they can write it in any kind of form or style they want. They can focus on whatever aspect of the album's production, and you can send your writing to the company, I think, and they will screen it and possibly publish it if they like it enough. And Carl Wilson, he wrote his 33 and a Third book, which eventually got expanded to this edition, but he wrote his about Celine Dion's Let's Talk About Love, which is a kind of peculiar book to choose because from what I understand, Celine Dion is one of the most reviled and maligned music figures for the critical perspective ever. For some reason, a lot of people hate her and hate her music. And a lot of this, for example, the opening of the book exemplifies this by talking about a watershed moment for indie music or music criticism or music journalists when in 1998 Celine Dion was nominated for the original song Oscar for My Heart Will Go On in the movie Titanic, and she was put up against Elliott Smith for a song he had in, I forgot what album, what movie in particular, but he had a song there. So yeah, they had to perform in the Oscars back to back, and you could see the stark differences between Celine Dion and Elliott Smith, and it was a big moment for indie music history, and it was kind of embarrassing to watch because of just the grandness of Celine Dion, and then the frailness and just it is a very awkward thing to watch. You can look at it for it online, and a lot of people hate Celine Dion. Apparently. So Carl Wilson tries to think about, well, why do people have such strong reviling feelings towards this woman who seems like a very nice person, who came from a not necessarily the best of lives, and she makes music that appeals to some people, and she tries to figure out, well, many people hate Celine Dion. Who likes Celine Dion? Maybe if we look at the people who like Celine Dion, hate Celine Dion, maybe we can find out more about what drives people to like music in general. What is taste? What is taste really? Is taste as objective or not? Is taste something that are inherently to each person? As everyone has certain taste? Is there such thing as good taste? Is there such thing as bad taste? And how does one measure whether one's taste is good or bad? Again, what a lot of the book very much digs deep into is this idea that musical taste in general, as much as we may not like to admit it, is fairly arbitrary. It is influenced by not only what we are exposed to by the radio, perhaps, or by our accessibility of exposure to things. And it's also influenced by where we're brought up, where we're from, whether it's a city or the country, or what kind of music propagates in the area where we're from, what our education level is, what our race is, whether you are white, black, Asian, Latino, what kind of music perhaps your parents introduced you to, what kind of ways of thinking, whether you're male or female. A lot of these things seem to have some kind of indication on how someone's taste progresses and evolves and changes. And for example, not to kind of generalize, but in the book, he finds out a lot of the main audience for Celine Dion's music is middle-aged women from the country. It sounds like a bit of a generalization, but there are certain counties in the United States, for example, that they just absolutely adore Celine Dion. They love her so much, and whenever she has new music, it's like a highlight for them. In a way that's very different from, for example, the New York music scene or something, or wherever else, where people just hate Celine Dion because of this feeling that she's cheesy and ersatz, and perhaps not real, but it's an interesting book because it kind of goes into what people think of as good music and bad music, and it subverts the idea of taste in general. In the same way that perhaps one may feel that their political affiliations are something that they come out of rationally. In the same way, perhaps some people believe that their music tastes come out of a rational decision of sorts. which, to some degree it's possible, but for example, political affiliations, political ideologies, the binary approach in the United States, for example, where you have Democrats and Republicans, the strongest correlation of political affiliation is actually where you're from. It's locational. That's the strongest correlation from all your factors of everything. It's where you're from, where you're born, where you grew up. That has a stronger connection to your political beliefs than anything else. And again, it's not very necessary. It's not something that is quite a controversial idea, but it's something that needs to be addressed. And when we talk about taste, when I come out and say like music is good, music is bad, pop music is bad, experimental hip hop is good, these things are very arbitrary because to some degree all music can be perceived as good. There are attributes to all forms of music that anyone can look at and feel resonate with and think is something that they would consider good. And there is no such thing as a piece of something that is more good or more great objectively than anything else. For these people, for example, with Celine Dion, what they talk about why they love Celine Dion is that they love the story of Celine Dion as someone who came from not necessarily the best of means, but she spent her whole life trying. She was a child star, I think, and there was a teenage music star, and she worked hard to come to a place where she can make these soaring love songs that make people feel at ease and appeased and safe and loved. And for many people, that is of a lot of worth, no matter how, for others, it may seem fake, or may seem not original or something. But the example of Celine Dion is not necessarily something that is at the heart of everything. At the heart of everything is just the idea that when we have such strong feelings about certain things, most of the time it comes from biases that we don't necessarily have the most self-awareness about. So when someone goes and says this music is so this is like a lot of for example, my philosophy of sorts of me talking about these kinds of music. I usually try to listen to some things that I don't necessarily even like, things that I don't think I will like, and I want to challenge myself to figure out why the music, to some degree, has some kind of worth. It's not something that is complicated. It's not something that is. It's just about moving out of my biases to some degree. So recently, for example, I listened to things as varied from, the Kanye West album to amazing Indian album called The Art of Sarangi by Ram Narayan, Indian Hindustani classical music, new hip hop. I listened to Shawn Mendes' a pop album. Then I tried to check out Death Grips, experimental hip hop. I want to really just try to push myself to realize why most things are not. And it's not necessarily to think that most things are good or most things can be perceived as good, but just to be able to come to a point when one can talk about how a certain kind of thing appeals to them. And for me personally, that is of more worth and of more use than this kind of patois or this kind of fakeness in which one would perceive themselves as someone who is more knowledgeable about objective qualities of things. That's what we get in most music reviews, where you have a kind of linear scale of rating, and one says, "Well, I know what a 10 is, I know what perfect music is, I know what one is, I know what trash music is," and it's very strongly influential because it influences how people perceive music. When you have a level of degree of thinking that certain people have more authority, or if you listen to art with the perspective of aligning one's opinions to an idea of an authority who knows more, and all this stuff, I don't think that is very helpful because it just further keeps us in a sense of, not to kind of quote Kanye West, but the idea of being a slave to thinking, or just not necessarily be a free thinker is a weird way of putting it, but just having the ability to let oneself experience things on their own terms and with all their biases, with all their situations, embrace everything and just be honest. It's about honesty, I think, honesty of experience, and a more phenomenological kind of talking about things in a way that's mostly about your experience of things and how things reflect yourself, and being more aware of everyone's biases and not necessarily trying to impose objectivity to a lot of this art, which everything just should be experienced and loved and listened to, because music is pretty great. So yeah, it's an interesting book. I highly recommend it. I probably didn't really talk about a lot of the issues or the actual, the meat of the book, but it's a good book and I liked it. And if anyone is interested in taste, how people get taste, where taste may come from, whether or not there's objectivity in taste, and how one can marry the idea of authority and taste and all this stuff, I think it would be a good book to read, and I highly recommend it. So, yeah, it's for what it's worth. It changed how I thought about things, and perhaps it may do the same for you. And I think anything that may possibly lead one to the possibility of having a different perspective is always worth experiencing and engaging with. So, yeah,